I'm Emma Whitmore, 26 years old, and 4 days before my wedding, I found a handwritten note from my parents that changed everything. Wedding is canceled. Lawyer will contact you. We've made our decision. My heart sank as I read those devastating words. After 2 years of trying to balance my love for Marcus with my family's impossible expectations, they had finally drawn their line in the sand. I stood in my childhood bedroom, gripping that note, knowing I wouldn't beg or plead. What I didn't know was that within 72 hours, everything would shift in ways I never could have imagined. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And please hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to choose between family approval and following your heart. Growing up as the eldest daughter of Victoria and William Whitmore meant living under the weight of 3 generations of pharmaceutical wealth. Our family had built an empire starting with my great-grandfather's small pharmacy, which eventually became Whitmore Pharmaceuticals, now one of the largest generic drug manufacturers on the East Coast. My father served as CEO while my mother managed our family's extensive charitable foundation and maintained our position in Philadelphia's most exclusive social circles. From childhood, my path was predetermined. Graduate from an elite university, preferably with a degree in business or pre-med, work within the family company for a respectable period, then marry someone from an established family who could contribute to both our social standing and business interests. The Whitmore legacy was sacred, and my role was to preserve and enhance it. I followed the script perfectly through college, earning my MBA from Wharton and working as a marketing director at Whitmore Pharmaceuticals for 3 years. My parents were pleased with my professional success, but they never stopped reminding me that my ultimate purpose was to secure an advantageous marriage. Their ideal son-in-law was clear: someone from old money, preferably with connections to healthcare, finance, or politics, and definitely someone whose family name would look impressive on our charitable foundation's board. That's why Marcus Rodriguez was doomed from the moment I brought him home 2 years ago. I met Marcus at a medical conference in Chicago, where I was representing our company's new partnership with Urban Hospitals. He was there as a pediatric nurse practitioner, presenting research on improving healthcare access in underserved communities. During his presentation, I was struck by his passion and the depth of his commitment to helping children, who reminded me of why I'd originally been drawn to healthcare before family expectations steered me toward business. At the networking reception, I approached him to discuss his research. We ended up talking for hours about healthcare disparities, the pharmaceutical industry's responsibility to communities, and our shared belief that medicine should be about healing, not just profit. For the first time in years, I found myself in a conversation where I could express my genuine thoughts without calculating how they might be perceived. Marcus grew up in a working-class Puerto Rican family in the Bronx. His father was a subway maintenance worker, his mother a school cafeteria manager. He'd earned a full scholarship to nursing school and worked nights as a hospital orderly to pay for living expenses. There was nothing artificial about him, just authentic dedication to his patients and an infectious optimism about making a difference in the world. Our first official date was unlike anything I'd experienced with the carefully vetted men my parents had introduced me to over the years. Marcus took me to a community health fair in North Philadelphia, where he volunteered on weekends. I watched him interact with families, translating medical information into Spanish for elderly patients and making children laugh while he checked their vital signs. For the first time, I saw healthcare as a calling rather than an industry. Over the following months, our relationship deepened beyond anything I'd known was possible. Marcus challenged me intellectually while accepting me emotionally. He encouraged my ideas about using our family foundation to fund community health initiatives, something I'd always wanted to propose but never had the confidence to pursue. With him, I felt like the person I was meant to be rather than the person I'd been groomed to become. 8 months ago, during a weekend trip to the Pocono Mountains, Marcus proposed with a simple silver ring that had belonged to his grandmother. It wasn't the elaborate setting or expensive diamond my parents had always described as appropriate for a Whitmore engagement, but it was perfect because it represented our authentic relationship rather than social expectations. When I called my parents to share the news, their response was immediately concerning. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," my mother said with unmistakable hesitation. We should meet with Marcus's family soon to begin planning. That meeting became the opening shot in what would escalate into an all-out family war. My parents insisted on hosting the engagement dinner at our estate, transforming what should have been a celebration into an interrogation. Marcus's parents, Anna and Roberto, were warm, humble people who had worked multiple jobs to support their 3 children's educations. Throughout the evening, my parents made subtle but cutting remarks designed to highlight the class differences between our families. The pharmaceutical industry requires such specific expertise, my father mentioned casually. I imagine nursing provides a very different perspective on healthcare. When Roberto mentioned his pride in Marcus being the first in their family to attend college, my mother responded, "How admirable that he's broken such barriers. Our family has maintained Harvard connections for 4 generations." I watched Marcus handle each veiled insult with grace, responding thoughtfully to questions that were designed to make him appear inadequate. His parents, too, remained dignified despite the obvious disrespect they were receiving. My anger grew with each passing hour, but I held my tongue, still hoping my parents would eventually recognize Marcus's worth. After the Rodriguez family left, my father was direct. "Emma, this young man seems pleasant enough, but he's entirely unsuitable for our family. His background, his career prospects, his family's social standing, none of it aligns with what we've worked to build here." "What we've built?" I responded, my voice shaking. "You mean the money? Because that's all you seem to care about. Marcus is intelligent, compassionate, and dedicated to helping people. Why isn't that enough?" My mother attempted a gentler approach. "Darling, we're not questioning his character. But marriage is about compatibility on every level. What will you have in common with his family long-term? How will you navigate social situations when their backgrounds are so different from ours? These differences create strain over time." "The only strain I'm feeling is from you two," I shot back. "Marcus makes me happy. He supports my dreams and challenges me to be better. Isn't that what marriage should be about?" My father's expression hardened. "Marriage is about building something lasting together. It's about ensuring our family's legacy continues through generations. Marcus Rodriguez cannot contribute to that legacy in any meaningful way." That conversation set the tone for the next 18 months. My parents grudgingly accepted the engagement, but made their disapproval clear at every opportunity. They questioned every wedding decision, from the venue to the guest list, attempting to maintain control over what they saw as their family's public image. The situation escalated dramatically 6 months before our wedding date when my father announced his intention to have Marcus sign a prenuptial agreement. "It's standard procedure for families in our position," he declared during a tense dinner meeting. "It protects everyone's interests." I was horrified. A prenup suggests I don't trust Marcus, and I do completely. I won't ask him to sign something that implies he's after our money. "Then you're being naive," my mother interjected. "People's motivations can change over time, especially when significant wealth is involved. This is about protecting what generations of Whitmores have built." Marcus, who had remained quiet throughout most of these confrontations, finally spoke up. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, I understand your concerns about protecting your family's assets. If a prenuptial agreement would give you peace of mind and allow us to move forward with your blessing, I'm willing to consider it." His offer to compromise, motivated by his desire to bridge the gap with my parents, only made me more protective of him. "No," I said firmly. "We won't be signing any prenup. If my parents can't trust my judgment about the man I love, that's their problem, not ours." The prenup became a line in the sand. My parents threatened to withdraw their financial support for the wedding, and I called their bluff. "Fine," I told them. "Marcus and I will pay for our own wedding. It'll be smaller and simpler, but it'll be ours." They backed down from that threat, apparently unwilling to suffer the social embarrassment of their daughter having a modest wedding, but the tension remained palpable. Every planning meeting became a battlefield where my preferences were questioned and my parents' vision was presented as the only acceptable option. 3 months before the wedding, I began noticing my parents having hushed conversations that would immediately stop when I entered the room. Twice, I overheard mentions of background verification and due diligence. When I confronted them about potentially investigating Marcus, they denied it, but their shifty responses confirmed my suspicions. We're simply ensuring all vendors and arrangements are properly vetted, my father insisted when I pressed the issue. But I didn't believe him, and the paranoia of being watched and judged began affecting both Marcus and me. 2 weeks before our wedding date, my suspicions were confirmed in the worst possible way. I had stopped by my parents' house to pick up some family jewelry for the ceremony when I heard voices from my father's study. Thinking it might be the wedding planner, I approached the partially open door. So the financial investigation revealed nothing concerning? I heard my father ask an unfamiliar voice. Clean record, the stranger replied. Student loans, car payment, typical debt for someone his age and profession. Nothing unusual. And the personal background? My mother's voice chimed in. That's where things get interesting, the man continued. There was definitely overlap in his previous relationship. Photos from social media show him with another woman at several events during the first month he was supposedly exclusive with your daughter. My blood turned to ice. I pushed the door open fully to find my parents sitting across from a private investigator, manila folders spread across the desk containing what appeared to be surveillance photos of Marcus. What is this? I demanded, though I already knew. The investigator quickly gathered his materials while my parents scrambled for explanations. After he left, my father attempted to justify their actions. Emma, we needed to be certain about Marcus's character. As your parents, we have a responsibility to protect you from making decisions without complete information. You hired someone to spy on Marcus, I said, my voice hollow with disbelief. You invaded our privacy and violated our trust. My mother tried a different approach. Darling, we discovered that Marcus wasn't entirely honest with you about his previous relationship. There's evidence he was still involved with someone else when you first started dating. The accusation felt like a physical blow. That's impossible. Marcus told me about his ex-girlfriend Carmen. They broke up before we met. According to our investigation, my father said, pulling out several photographs, he attended multiple social events with Carmen Valdez during your first month of dating, including her sisters Quincy and Era, where they appeared very much together. He showed me photos of Marcus in a suit, his arm around a beautiful Latina woman at what was clearly a family celebration. The timestamp showed a date 3 weeks after Marcus and I had our first date. I stared at the images, my mind racing to make sense of what I was seeing. Marcus had mentioned Carmen, his college girlfriend, but he'd said their relationship ended before we met. These photos suggested otherwise, and the betrayal cut deep. There's more, my mother said gently, seeing my distress. Phone records show regular contact between them for several weeks after he claims they broke up. I left my parents' house in a daze, the photographs burning a hole in my purse. Instead of driving home to the apartment Marcus and I shared, I went to my best friend Kate's house, needing space to process what I'd learned. Kate listened without judgment as I explained the situation, including my parents' investigation and the photographic evidence. What are you going to do? She asked when I finished. I don't know, I admitted. I feel like I don't know what's real anymore. Did Marcus lie to me? Are my parents manipulating the situation? I can't tell the difference between facts and their spin on things. That evening, when Marcus came home from his shift at the children's hospital, I was waiting with the photos spread across our coffee table. His face went pale when he saw them. Emma, where did you get these? My parents hired a private investigator, I said, watching his expression carefully. They showed me these today. You told me you and Carmen broke up before we met. Marcus sat heavily beside me, running his hands through his hair. Technically, that's true, but it's more complicated than I made it sound. Carmen and I had been having problems for months before I met you. We'd officially broken up, but we were still trying to work things out. So, you were dating both of us? The question made me feel sick. No, he said quickly. After I met you at that conference, I knew what Carmen and I had was really over. The quinceañera was her sister's wedding. I'd RSVP'd months in advance, and Carmen asked me to still attend as her date to avoid family drama. I should have told you about it, but it felt like ancient history by the time we got serious. Part of me wanted to believe him. His explanation made sense, and I knew the early weeks of our relationship had been casual before we'd committed to exclusivity. But the betrayal of discovering this information from my parents rather than from Marcus himself overshadowed everything else. You should have been honest with me, I said, tears starting to fall. Finding out this way, from my parents' investigation, makes it look like you were hiding something worse. I know, Marcus admitted, reaching for my hands. I made a mistake by not telling you about the quinceañera. But Emma, I swear to you there was no cheating, no deception. By our third date, Carmen and I were completely finished, and I was already falling for you. I needed time to think. Despite my love for Marcus and my logical understanding that his explanation made sense, I felt overwhelmed by the emotional impact of my parents' revelations. I think I need some space tonight, I told him. I'm going to stay at Kate's. Marcus looked devastated but nodded. I understand. Just please don't let your parents' manipulation destroy what we have. They're looking for any excuse to break us up. I spent 2 days at Kate's house, avoiding calls from both Marcus and my parents while I tried to sort through my feelings. Kate encouraged me to trust my instincts about Marcus rather than letting my parents' investigation poison my judgment. You know Marcus better than anyone, she pointed out. Has he ever given you reason to doubt his honesty or commitment in 2 years together? The answer was no. Marcus had been consistently loving, supportive, and trustworthy throughout our relationship. While I wished he'd been more transparent about the quinceañera, I understood why he might have considered it irrelevant ancient history. On the third day, I decided to return home and move forward with our wedding plans. Marcus's relief was palpable when I told him my decision. I trust you, I said. I wish you told me about Carmen earlier, but I understand why you didn't. My parents are trying to find problems where none exist, and I won't let them succeed. We spent the evening discussing how to handle my parents' continued interference. Marcus suggested we consider eloping to avoid further drama, but I wasn't ready to give up on having my family at our wedding. They're still my parents, I explained. As awful as their behavior has been, I keep hoping they'll come around once they see how happy we are together. What I didn't know was that my parents had no intention of backing down. While I was trying to rebuild trust with Marcus, they were preparing their final gambit to stop our wedding entirely. 4 days before our wedding, I returned to my childhood home one last time to collect my grandmother's pearl necklace, which I planned to wear as my something old. The house was eerily quiet when I arrived, with both my parents' cars missing from the driveway. On the foyer table, propped against a crystal vase filled with white roses from my mother's garden, was a cream-colored envelope with my name written in my mother's distinctive calligraphy. My hands trembled as I opened it, somehow knowing that whatever was inside would be devastating. The message was brief and cold. Wedding is canceled. Lawyer will contact you. We've made our decision. I read the note 3 times, each reading making the reality sink in deeper. My parents hadn't just withdrawn their support, they had actively sabotaged our wedding entirely. With shaking fingers, I called Marcus. They've canceled everything, I told him when he answered. My parents left me a note saying the wedding is off and their lawyer will be contacting me. What do you mean canceled everything? Marcus asked, his voice tight with concern. I don't know yet, but I'm about to find out. Over the next hour, I made a series of devastating phone calls. Our wedding planner, caterer, florist, and photographer had all received calls from my father's office canceling our services and citing a family emergency. Since my parents had signed the contracts and paid the deposits, the vendors had no choice but to comply. I'm so sorry, Emma, our wedding planner said, her voice full of genuine regret. Your father was very clear that the wedding was canceled indefinitely. He also mentioned that if we attempted to work with you directly to reinstate the event, his legal team would make things very difficult for our business. The venue coordinator delivered the final blow. Your father not only canceled your reservation, Miss Whitmore, but he also made it clear that if we hosted your wedding anyway, it would jeopardize our relationship with several other prominent families who book events with us regularly. Given your family's influence in Philadelphia society, we simply can't risk that kind of fallout. I sank onto my childhood bed, feeling completely defeated. My parents had systematically destroyed every aspect of our wedding using their wealth and social connections as weapons. They hadn't just withdrawn their support, they had actively sabotaged our happiness. When Marcus arrived at the house 30 minutes later, I was still sitting in the same position, staring at the note. He took in my devastated expression and immediately sat beside me. "Tell me everything," he said gently. As I explained the scope of my parents' sabotage, I expected Marcus to be furious. Instead, he remained remarkably calm, holding my hand while I recounted each canceled vendor. "Emma," he said when I finished, "this doesn't change anything about us. Yes, they've made it impossible for us to have the wedding we planned, but we can still get married. Maybe not this weekend, and maybe not with 200 guests, but we can figure this out." His steadiness in the face of this crisis reminded me why I'd fallen in love with him in the first place. "I won't let them control my life this way," I said, finding my resolve. "I won't beg them to reconsider or negotiate about their money. If they want to declare war on our happiness, that's their choice." Marcus helped me pack everything I wanted to take from my childhood room: photos, personal items, and my grandmother's jewelry. As we loaded my belongings into his car, I took one last look at the house where I'd grown up, feeling both grief and liberation. "What are we going to do about the wedding?" I asked as we drove to our apartment. "We're getting married," Marcus said with quiet determination. "Maybe not the way we originally planned, but we're not letting them win this battle." Once we were home, the emotional weight of the day hit me fully. I collapsed on our couch and cried harder than I had since childhood. Not delicate tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from the core of my being. Marcus held me without trying to fix anything, understanding that I needed to grieve the loss of my family's support. When I could finally speak again, my voice was hoarse but determined. "I want to get married this weekend. Not because I'm rushing, but because I refuse to let them dictate our timeline." Marcus smiled, relief evident in his expression. "Then we'll make it happen. It won't be the fancy society wedding your parents envisioned, but it'll be ours." We spent the evening making calls to friends and family, explaining that while there had been a family dispute, our wedding was absolutely still happening. Marcus's family immediately offered their support, with his mother suggesting we hold the ceremony in their backyard and his sister volunteering to handle decorations. Kate immediately sprang into action, offering to coordinate whatever we needed. "Those manipulative monsters aren't going to win," she declared with fierce loyalty. "We're making this the best wedding ever, just out of spite." By midnight, exhausted but determined, we had the foundation of a new plan. It would be smaller, simpler, and more authentic to who we really were. As we finally went to bed, I felt a mixture of heartbreak and hope. Devastated by my parents' betrayal, but strengthened by the knowledge that Marcus and I were facing this challenge together. What I couldn't have predicted was the ally who would emerge the next morning, someone who would completely change the balance of power in this family conflict. Exactly 72 hours after finding my parents' note, I was sitting at our kitchen table making lists of everything we needed for our scaled-down wedding when our doorbell rang. Marcus had left early for a shift at the hospital, so I approached the door cautiously, half expecting to find a lawyer or perhaps my parents themselves. Instead, I opened the door to find my paternal grandmother, Catherine Whitmore, standing on our doorstep. At 79, she remained an elegant force of nature, impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit and pearls, her silver hair styled in the same classic bob she'd worn for decades. "Grandmother Catherine," I said in shock. She lived primarily in Manhattan and rarely made unannounced visits to Philadelphia. "Hello, dear," she said with her characteristic directness. "I believe we need to talk. May I come in?" I stepped aside, still stunned by her unexpected appearance. Catherine Whitmore was a formidable woman who had navigated New York's most exclusive social circles for over 50 years. She was also the matriarch who had built much of our family's current wealth through her own business acumen after my grandfather's death. She surveyed our modest apartment with interest rather than judgment. "So this is where you've been living. It has character. Good natural light. Grandmother, how did you know I was here?" Did my parents send you? She laughed, a surprisingly warm sound. Your parents have no idea I'm here. In fact, they would be quite upset if they knew about this visit. She settled herself on our couch with the authority of someone accustomed to commanding any room she entered. I came because I heard about their appalling behavior regarding your wedding. What they've done is unconscionable and goes against everything I tried to teach your father about family loyalty. Relief flooded through me. Then you don't agree with what they're doing? Absolutely not, she said firmly. But I'm not entirely surprised. You see, Emma, this isn't the first time our family has faced this type of conflict. 55 years ago, I was in a remarkably similar situation. This was news to me. I'd always known my grandparents as the perfect power couple, their marriage apparently seamless and socially advantageous. Your grandfather Charles was indeed from an established family with the right connections, Catherine continued. But he wasn't my first choice. Before him, I fell deeply in love with a young doctor named Michael Chen. Brilliant, compassionate, from a Chinese-American family who had built a successful medical practice in San Francisco. I leaned forward, fascinated by this revelation about my grandmother's past. What happened? My parents reacted exactly as William and Victoria are reacting now. They threatened to disinherit me, canceled my engagement party, and used their social influence to pressure Michael's medical colleagues. The racism was explicit in those days. They made it clear that no granddaughter of theirs would marry outside their narrow definition of acceptable society. Her expression grew distant with old regret. And I capitulated. I broke things off with Michael and married Charles 6 months later. Were you unhappy with grandfather? I had always seen them as a devoted couple. Charles and I built a good partnership. We learned to love each other over time, and he was a wonderful father to your father. But I never felt with him what you clearly feel for Marcus, that spark of true understanding and shared purpose. I don't want you to make the same compromise I did. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a leather portfolio. Which brings me to why I'm here. Your parents seem to have forgotten some important details about the structure of our family's wealth. I looked at her in confusion. The trust fund they're threatening to withhold, the foundation assets they claim to control, much of it was established with my money and remains under my legal authority as the surviving founder. I've spent this morning with my attorneys reviewing all the relevant documents. She handed me a legal letter from her law firm. Your parents have no legal right to withhold your inheritance based on their disapproval of your marriage. None whatsoever. The trust was established to provide financial independence for family members, not as a tool for parental control. I stared at the document, hardly believing what I was reading. But that's not all, Catherine said with a slight smile. I've also been making some phone calls this morning to various people in Philadelphia who still remember the weight my name carries. As if summoned by her words, our phone rang. It was a representative from our original wedding venue. Miss Whitmore, the voice said apologetically, we're calling to inform you that your wedding reservation for this Saturday has been reinstated. We sincerely apologize for any confusion and look forward to hosting your special day. I hung up the phone in amazement. Grandmother, how did you? Let's just say I reminded certain people that the Whitmore name doesn't belong exclusively to your parents, and that honoring contracts is more important than bowing to intimidation tactics. Throughout the morning, similar calls came in from our caterer, florist, and other vendors, all confirming that our original arrangements had been restored. My phone started buzzing with messages from friends who had received corrections to the earlier cancellation notices. When Marcus returned from his hospital shift and I introduced him to my grandmother, she studied him with the same keen assessment she was famous for in business circles. I can see why Emma chose you, she said after several minutes of conversation. You have integrity and genuine compassion. That's rarer than you might think in our circles. Marcus, who had been nervous about meeting the formidable Catherine Whitmore, relaxed visibly. Thank you for supporting us, Mrs. Whitmore. Your acceptance means everything to Emma. Call me Catherine, she replied warmly. And I haven't done anything extraordinary. I've simply ensured that my granddaughter can make her own choices without financial coercion. Over lunch, Catherine shared more about her own experience and offered wisdom about navigating family conflict. Your parents are acting from fear, she explained. Fear of change, fear of losing control, fear that you're rejecting everything they value. It doesn't excuse their behavior, but understanding it might help you find a path forward eventually. Do you think they'll ever accept Marcus? I asked. Time will tell. Your parents are stubborn, but they do love you. Once they realize they can't control your decisions, they'll have to choose between their pride and their relationship with their daughter. As the afternoon progressed, Catherine prepared to return to New York. I'll be staying at the Rittenhouse Hotel until after the wedding, she informed us. I assume I'm still invited? Of course, I said, hugging her tightly. Would you consider walking me down the aisle? Since my father won't be there. For the first time since I'd known her, I saw tears in my grandmother's eyes. It would be my greatest honor, Emma. After she left, Marcus and I sat in amazed silence for several minutes. Your grandmother is incredible, Marcus finally said. I can't believe how completely she turned everything around. Neither can I admitted. From thinking our wedding was completely ruined to having everything restored in a single day. As we resumed our wedding preparations with renewed energy, I reflected on the unexpected gift my parents' interference had ultimately given us. The crisis had forced me to clarify what truly mattered and who genuinely supported us. While my parents' absence would still hurt, it would also serve as a reminder that we had chosen authenticity over approval. Saturday morning dawned crisp and beautiful, perfect October weather for an outdoor ceremony. As I prepared in the bridal suite at our venue, surrounded by Kate and my bridesmaids, there was an almost surreal quality to the moment. After the emotional chaos of the past week, it seemed miraculous that we were here, proceeding with our wedding as originally planned. My parents had maintained their silence throughout the week, neither acknowledging that the wedding had been reinstated nor making any further legal threats. Their absence created a bittersweet undercurrent to the day, but I refused to let it overshadow our happiness. You look absolutely radiant, Kate said as she helped adjust my veil. I had chosen a classic A-line gown with delicate beading, elegant but not ostentatious, more reflective of my true style than the elaborate designer dress my mother had originally pushed for. I feel like myself, I replied, studying my reflection. Like I'm finally being honest about who I am and what I want. A knock at the door revealed my grandmother, resplendent in champagne silk with sapphire jewelry that had been in our family for generations. It's time, dear, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. As the music began and we prepared to walk down the aisle, Catherine took my arm. Remember, she whispered, you're not losing a family today. You're creating a new one. The ceremony was more moving than I could have imagined. Standing before our guests, a smaller group than originally planned, but filled with people who genuinely cared about us, I felt a certainty that had been missing during all the family drama. Marcus's vows brought tears to my eyes. Emma, when we met, I knew you were special, but I never imagined someone like you would choose someone like me. This past week has tested us in ways we never expected, but it's only confirmed that you are the strongest, most determined woman I've ever known. I promise to stand beside you through whatever challenges life brings, to support your dreams as you've supported mine, and to remember always that when we face difficulties together, we become stronger. My own vows, rewritten the night before to acknowledge our journey, came straight from my heart. Marcus, I choose you freely, completely, and joyfully. Recent events have taught me that love isn't about meeting others' expectations or following predetermined paths. It's about recognizing the person who brings out your best self and building a life based on shared values. I promise to face life's challenges with the same courage and integrity you've shown, and to never take for granted the precious gift of choosing our own path. As we exchanged rings, I glanced at the seats where my parents should have been. Instead of emptiness, I found my grandmother, her presence a reminder that family is defined by love and support, not merely by genetics or tradition. The reception was filled with genuine joy and celebration. Without the formal constraints my mother had planned, the atmosphere was relaxed and authentic. Marcus's family mixed easily with my friends, creating new connections that felt natural and unforced. During the toasts, my grandmother rose to speak, immediately commanding the room's attention with her natural authority. Marriage, she began, is not a business arrangement or a social contract, though many families have treated it as such for generations. True marriage is a partnership between two people who see in each other not what society values, but what genuinely matters: character, compassion, and commitment. She paused, looking directly at Marcus and me. Emma and Marcus have demonstrated all these qualities, not just in their relationship with each other, but in how they've handled the obstacles placed in their path. May their union remind us all that the most valuable family traditions are those that give us the courage to forge our own paths, not those that restrict us to narrow expectations. Her words hung in the air as both a blessing on our marriage and a gentle rebuke to the values my parents had prioritized. Several guests who knew our family situation nodded approvingly, understanding the deeper meaning of her message. As the evening progressed, I received an unexpected message, a formal note delivered by hotel staff. The handwriting was my father's, the message brief and cold. "We hope you'll reconsider this decision before it's too late. When you're ready to discuss this rationally, you know how to reach us." No congratulations, no well wishes.